Uh, so yes, these webinars are being recorded and are streamed live on Facebook. If you have any questions for the panelists, please put them down in the chat box. We have a Q&A session towards the end for 20-25 minutes, and we'll take up all your questions during that round. And you can ask questions in the language you're comfortable in. अगर आप हिंदी में बात करना चाहते हैं, आप हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं, इंग्लिश में बात करना चाहते हैं, इंग्लिश में भी पूछ सकते हैं. And finally, I would like to introduce the wonderful panel that we have today. I welcome Jehan Manekshaw. Jehan is the head of school at Drama School Mumbai, also a director, theatre maker. This whole initiative, this started in 2008 with theatre professionals, and then Drama School was established in 2013, and Jehan, with his co-founder Tasneem Fatehi, was instrumental uh, in establishing this. And also the vision behind this was to create and forge a new generation of theatre makers. So Jehan is going to talk about how we design the curriculum, what's the process, what's the DSM approach, training approach. Welcome, Jehan. And next we have with us Nilofer Sagar, who is a theater and live arts producer. She's an entrepreneur. She's also a manager at the Chair Influence company. Nilofer is also a faculty at Drama School Mumbai, and she's been leading the entrepreneurship module. And we also have Mahesh Dattani. Mahesh Dattani doesn't need any introduction. He's a very famous playwright and director. And Mahesh and Nilofer have been associated with the school for the last 6-7 years, and they've seen almost every batch graduating and doing wonderful things, like not only as actors and performers, but there are people who have been doing like writing, directing. They've opened their theater companies, and I think this is a very beautiful part of this curriculum. And I'm really happy to have this panel in front of me to talk about all these things today. And yeah, I'm sure you're going to benefit a lot from this session. And last but not the least, I want to introduce Arjun Iyer, who is a very, very dear friend and also an alumnus of DSM, and who has kindly volunteered to moderate this session. Arjun is an actor and a theater maker and a drama educator who's been working in this field for the last 5-6 years, and also a very good, wonderful person. And thank you, Arjun, for volunteering to moderate this session today. Thank you so much. And yeah, the room is all yours. Lead on. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful session today.
Okay, thank you, Shruti, for such kind words. All right. So let's start with where it all began. Jihan, we know that year after year, Drama School has been instrumental in developing and evolving pedagogy. You observe a batch, you add new things, and things keep getting evolved. In fact, in our batch, we had a live musical in our annual production, which was something which was a new concept that we had a music teacher, Amod Bhatt, who gave a live music. And that was an experience, I think, the result of an evolving pedagogy. And then obviously COVID-19 hit us, and we were all in a pandemic. And of course, for the new batch, you needed not only creativity, but imagination, practicality, and all those things. And we know that Drama School did take a lot of step-by-step approach. They had unrehearsed futures where you had webinar sessions with drama schools around the globe to discuss concerns. You had global faculty programs where faculty members from India and abroad taught in the online platform. And then, of course, you conceived this one semester digital course where students were learning theater online. Now, my first question is, A, what were the challenges and concerns while conceiving this course? And second, what were your specific observations in terms of skill and tools that you felt an individual in the confines of his house was able to not only understand, but also apply within the exercises?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, last but not least, Arjun and Shruti, I think that all of us in the DSM faculty family, the thing that we're most proud of is our alumni. And in terms of, you guys should all check out what Arjun does in terms of his life and his work, and Shruti and other alumni, because I think that's the true testament to what we do. And yes, I co-founded Theatre Professionals in 2008 with Tasneem Fatehi, but the DSM was founded with an endorsement letter for the public written by Mahesh Dattani in 2013. The first sort of letter saying, I bless this venture, and we put it up as a testimonial. And it was great. But it was also founded by Padma Damodaran and Gitanjali Kulkarni, who you might all know, who's an NST graduate. Padma was an East 15 graduate from the UK, both practicing actors in India. And quickly amongst them came an entire collaboration, an entire group of people. So whilst I hold the space, or whilst I sit there and say, chalo, hum log ek school chalayenge, from day one, the pedagogy that you speak of, Arjun, has been evolved because of the inputs and the direct inputs for people like Mahesh, Nilufer. Nilufer sits on our advisory council. She sees to it that we run the school properly from a management and a business perspective, and keeps our executive head and myself in check in terms of making sure we run things properly. So all of this is just to say that the Drama School Mumbai, if you go to the website and just see the About Us page, you'll see the brains behind it. These are not just faces on a screen. These are all people who contribute every day in a dynamic way to what allows the DSM to even adapt to these pandemic times. You're absolutely right. The course changes year on year, and it evolves every year because we try and take learning. We don't have a fixed कि यही है और इसी तरीके से हम drama सिखाएंगे. We have a very strong spinal structure that focuses around acting, creation, dramaturgy, entrepreneurship. And these are the four kind of pillars that sort of make the program work. And within those pillars, different people, we break it down into sub-modules in terms of how those pillars are going to work. And we take those from best practices across the world, because every one of our faculty is trained from somewhere abroad, or from the National School of Drama or other places, or they have a lifetime's worth of experience. Mahesh, for example, and they bring all of that in to teach and deliver the pedagogy and the teaching experience for the students. And so this is what makes it all work. Secondly, in terms of adapting, yes, we try and improve ourselves every year. When we were hit with the pandemic, we weren't even sure if we could even teach in the online space. And you mentioned it. What we did was we started up a conversation with drama schools and theater teachers across the world. We also invited a lot of international teachers to start coming in via Zoom to teach people who believed in the DSM's work. And we created a very robust system for online digital learning and training, be it the how do you set up your space at home, be it the rituals of performance training, be it what can we teach across this medium and what can't we teach across this medium, and knowing the difference. And so these are the kind of practices we had. Could we teach a physical theater class? Yes or no? First, we thought not. Then we found out that we could. Gitanjali did a class on Navras. A city company from New York came in and did a whole class on movement, rhythm, space, body, voice. And so we basically set up, in fact, Shruti was leading a lot of the technical and the space preparation setup instructions for all of our students in these short workshops. And we soon created a complete protocol of working. How do you work in the digital space? How do you create your own homeroom? What does a faculty member have to do in their own space? And what kind of training can the faculty member do successfully and not successfully? And all of this was in consistent review, which allowed us to create that digital semester, which has just completed. And the same students from that digital semester, which just completed, are now actually sitting in isolation at a hotel in Bangalore, just doing their 1 week of setting up a COVID bubble. And on Thursday, they get into a bus and they go to Infinite Souls, which is a farm and a theater space, which has lots of spaces to live, etc. And they are going to be training over there. And so what we've done is it's actually a full year's program that these students have gone on, the ones that we started, our first pandemic / post-pandemic batch. I don't think we can ever say post-pandemic. And our pandemic batch, or this batch for the new times. And in this particular scenario, they've done a digital training semester, which is focused on their individual growth as actors and theater makers. And in the next semester, they're going to do a completely residential boot camp unit, 13 weeks, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Just they're going to be training physically, intensely in space, and they're going to be making theater and learning acting and learning performance as an ensemble. All the things that we could not do in a digital space, we're doing in a residential COVID bubble. And the previous batch is jealous because they didn't have a 13-week boot camp where they got to go and live on a farm and learn a whole other pace of life with which to train and learn.
Right. So, Jihan, in this semester, you have the same bunch who are now going to be in a residency. And a residency, again, is something that DSM is attempting for the first time. But if you could come back to the first semester and if you could tell us specific things that you felt in your observation that students are picking up as individuals in the confines of their homes, which is working, and therefore your pedagogy is working. So what are those things that you've observed while this course was on?
That's a good question, and a challenging one. So let me break it down in simpler terms. We were very cautious and very guarded with the first batch. We did not want to see the choice at the beginning of the pandemic was, do we even teach or do we declare a 0 year? And we decided, okay, we're going to try and teach. We're going to try and figure this out. But then if we're going to do anything, we've got to do it with real mindfulness of what can work and not work. Not just, chalo, hum digital karte hain, kuch bhi sikhayenge, kaise bhi sikhayenge. There's no question of us at the DSM doing something like that. So what we actually did was we sat down and said, what can we teach across this medium in a way that you can do? So we could teach yoga, we could teach voice work, we could teach character work. We could teach all kinds of things that focused around an individual's growth. And provided the instruction was clear. So what also forced us to do, because the digital medium is so heavily oriented around instruction and language, is it forced everybody in the faculty to be very precise. Normally in a workshop room or in a rehearsal room at the DSM, a faculty member knows what they're going to teach. They know the 3-hour plan, right? And then they sit in the room and they get a feel of it and they find a way through it. And at the end of the 3 hours, they know that I got this done, but today I got it done this way. And the next time I come and teach the same 3-hour module, it will happen differently. And there was a certain amount of playful time in there. And flexibility and fluidity. Over here, instruction and language became so important that we really had to be very precise. So a lot of pedagogy got even further crystallized for a sort of precise instructionality, because we knew that only if you follow the instruction, do the exercise where you are in your space, which is you have also set up properly as per the instructions given by the school, then only will you understand and wo experiences महसूस हो जाएगा. And the training experiences जो महसूस होता है, so at the DSM, one of the things we believe in is lifelong learning. We want our students to almost become, have an Eklavya kind of attitude. Like, I'm going to be a lifelong self-driven, self-motivated learner. At the DSM, we say, हम लोग तो सिखाएंगे, we will teach, but teaching is only half of it. The real job is the learning. How do you learn? And so we work with the students. They write self-reflection journals every second week, which is about their learning process. Because after the whole year, you've written about 20 self-reflection journals. You've really picked up and understood for yourself your own learning methods, your own learning journey. And so I was reading these self-reflection journals across the digital batch to see how they were doing as students. And what I found was that if they hadn't said things like the Zoom space in their self-reflections, the students were going through very similar learning arcs in their own personal growth, their own insecurities, their own challenges, the moments that they had an aha moment, a penny dropped, oh, now I know how to do this, so therefore I can do that, or the connection of the dots between Rudy's class and Tushar's class, or yoga and that voice work. We could see them making those connections, and it was almost like word for word similar to journals of like your batch. Like Arjun, I could read your 20 reflections from your batch and read like somebody from this batch's 20 reflections and see parallels in it. which meant that learning was happening, something was happening. And we saw these students' bodies and voices and imaginations transform. And we were being very cautious. This is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it back. We were being very cautious because we also didn't want to overpromise in this space. And we found that the students were chomping at the bit. So hum log to matlab piche we were pulling the reins back. Gulam kehte hain na usko, we were holding them back. And the students were wanting to run much faster than we were willing to let them run, to the point that they said, look, I know you're teaching us individual performance work, but we want to create. We want to make work together. So we created something called a scratch night, which was like an adda open mic night where students would create performances, kuch bhi ho, ungraded, unevaluated, just a free space for experimentation and exploration. And soon enough, by the time we got to the middle of the semester, we gave them a 1-week collaborative creation exercise because they wanted to be creative. They wanted to make work, even though it was in the digital space. It's not theater, but they were making and they were practicing the tools of creativity, which is part of the school's pedagogy. How do we work as a group together, a group of 3 or group of 4, and make something together? It wasn't theater, but they were still making creative pieces together.
So essentially, also the spirit of an ensemble gets evoked within the online space by curating events like these addas. My next question is, I think, open to all because all have worked within the online space. I know Dursia brothers have created work in the online space. Mahesh, sir, you've done workshops in the online space, and DSM has a semester within the digital space. Now, when we are in an actual physical space, there is an essential agreement between a director or a teacher or an instructor and the students. And there is a safe space that one creates to ensure that lines are not crossed and things don't get blurred. Now, the digital space in itself is its own genie. There are privacy issues, there are issues of one's, because in a theater training, you get vulnerable, you bring yourself within this space. So what are the best practices and protocols one should ideally maintain while conducting training in this online space? And of course, specific to DSM, what are the things that you guys have ensured to make a person feel safe and rest assured?
So look, health and safety practices at any school have to be there for any training, whether it's digital, in person, etc. What are the health and safety protocols of a particular space? It's another medium, but human beings are interacting in this medium. So basic things like code of conduct, everything from like just how you treat each other with respect, your honesty, your ability to just sit out of a class if you're not feeling up to it, etc. All of that was there. In addition, as you had mentioned, we've been talking to drama schools across the world to understand because like in India, liability issues and all aren't as strict as in the West, for example. But in the West, they're really worried about things like are students feeling safe? Are the faculty feeling safe? Is everyone's socio-emotional safety taken care of? Is there any situation in which a bad instruction could be given and there would be an injury? So all of those things we take very seriously. And so we have protocols in place for pretty much everything. In addition, we made choices at the DSM. For example, we want the work to be there in the moment. We want everyone to be very present during their learning. People can't just show up and put their screens off and sit there in the corner. We don't know, we want an agreement that all 5 of us right now are sitting here in this space and we are present with each other. We don't have our phones on, etc. And so for that presence to work, not only were there those instructions, but we also said we wouldn't record classes. If it's happened there, you have an experience of it. You can't catch a recording later. We're not recording it for any surveillance purpose or anything like that, because we wanted that live thing that this training is happening here and now. So multiple things. This is just 1 or 2 examples, but multiple things that we've kept in mind based on any health and safety. And in addition, just this year, in fact, we have also been thinking about, thinking about things like POSH, the prevention of sexual harassment, etc. What happens in a rehearsal space on a film set? What happens on a rehearsal space in a theater set? How do you choreograph a kissing scene? In the West, for example, they'll choreograph a fight scene where you know that the sword is going to come this way, you're going to block that way, the block is going to come that way, then you're going to jab this way, and the whole thing is choreographed. Similarly, if you're choreographing an intimacy scene, it has to be choreographed. You're going to hold somebody here, you're going to touch their hair here, not here. So you're going to put a hand on a waist over here, you're going to put the hand on a chest here. And the idea of intimacy awareness, the idea of working out comfort, discomfort, all of that is a thing that you have to learn if you're going to be a practicing actor. So this year we've tied up with a group called the Intimacy Collective India, which is a group of amazing intimacy coordinators and choreographers who work in the industry, and they're going to be teaching intimacy work at the DSM, along with the other things that we do, because we have physiotherapists, we have mental health counselors, we have all of these things in place. We have a student convener in place. All of them are there to create support mechanisms that fuel this whole idea of safe space. And it's safe space. It doesn't matter whether it's digital or physical. The DSM always looks for safe space.
Thank you, Jihan. I know Mahesa has to leave early, so we'll hit Mahesa right now. Mahesa, you've had this beautiful dual relationship with the students. You've also been their faculty member, and you've also worked with many of them in the outside space. So you've had a relationship of faculty student, and then it has evolved into professional director, professional actor. So what has been your observation working with DSM students who come out as professional actors within the confines of a professional space, and how have you seen them adapting to their training within that professional space?
Okay. First of all, had I not been a guest faculty at DSM, right, if I were just a professional director, I could tell the actors who've had some kind of grounding, like the kind of grounding DSM offers. I'll just give you a very simple example that when I was directing this, it was a film project. We were directing plays for film. The 3 actors whom I had chosen out of the 7, who would be there 5 minutes earlier at rehearsals and who were warming up, all 3 of them were DSM pass outs, right? So I cannot overstress how important it is for me as a professional director or working, as a professional theater maker, writer, director, whatever it is, to have actors who are trained. This is very, very important, because I think the difference between amateurs and professionals, especially actors, it's not this sort of woolly-headed thing called talent or, professional actors are better at what they do. That's not entirely true. But I think, a non-professional, or let me say a non-trained actor, might be able to give you something at rehearsals that's beautiful and something amazing, right? But then the second time, if it is a retake or the second rehearsal, it's only the actor with some kind of training who would be able to sustain it or develop it. And that's where immediately the difference is very clear. So coming to your question about my sort of dual relationship with the DSM students while they're students and as alumni when they pass out, I think I don't see too much of a difference apart from my own attitude, that when I'm teaching them at the DSM space as a guest faculty, I understand that there is a decorum. I do come in as a mentor, and I am focused entirely on what is, at what stage is this individual at, right? And it's not about getting from point A to B. It's a very circuitous route, as you know. But then in the professional sphere, I'm looking at them as artistic collaborators. And again, that kind of collaboration comes with the discipline that an institute like DSM has, because there's just too much rubbish out there, which I don't mean to undermine anything. And I'm not talking about just India, even working professionally abroad, you have this whole thing about professional insecurities. You're holding your cards very closely to your chest, and that's not the way you're going to create something monumental. And I think training helps break those barriers, create a sense of confidence, because how do you trust someone else unless you're confident about yourself? So I see all that in the students, and obviously there are some students who've taken the learning, who bring in their own innate abilities and skills and are able to put them all together and offer something which is very unique and very special. And I think good training does that. It doesn't create, it doesn't clone, it doesn't create a template for actors. What good training does is it makes you in a situation where only you and nobody else can do whatever you're doing, whether you're acting, whether you're designing, whether you're writing. It doesn't matter. It has to be something that you and you alone can give. And that can actually, in a strange way, come only through a foundation in training, whether it's an institution or whether you learn on the job or whether it's just empirical knowledge, which, someone in my senior years, I mean, one just gathers, but one also looks back at mistakes one had made starting off and wish that there was an institution, 40 years ago, which that I could have joined. But yeah, in a nutshell, it's a very dynamic relationship which I have as mentor and as a professional director.
All right. When you talk about training, I think one of the most exciting features of the drama school is the final limb of our training, where we are given autonomy, where we are given a limited budget, we are given 3 weeks, and we have to create our own unique theatrical piece. And we have to basically collaborate with our fellow ensembles, from the light to the design. So it's a very exciting phase because it's the first time the public will see our work, and it is also guided by a mentor, something that we would not get in the outside world. So what are, in this level and this aspect of the training, what are the key things that a student must be mindful of to take full advantage of this part of the pedagogy?
Yeah, first of all, I think it is a super deluxe luxury that the student has working on something like the end of the term project, because an institution is the only space an artist has where they can work on their challenges, because the rest of the world is only interested in your strength. As an actor, as a director, as a writer, if I'm in the professional sphere, I can only display my strength. Weaknesses is something I do not have the luxury of exploring because there's far too much at stake. And I think this is a luxury that training like this offers. And I think the kind of project work that is done is seen in that spirit, is that you are taking steps into the unknown, because all of a sudden you're holding the baby. And now it is the question of, how do I use all these skills that I have with me, and how do I use my intelligence? How do I use my heart? How do I work with my talents into this? And I think the luxury to fail is something that no place else can offer you, except in an institution. And I think failure means success in the future, because you are a creative person. And if you do not give yourself the space to fail, you can never, ever be successful.
All right. Jihan, you have a question? Your hands up.
No, just add on it, even with the last batch, which is the batch that got disrupted by the pandemic and they were denied the ability to do that exercise. Whatever funds we had remaining, we pooled into something called an alumni production grant, which was just opened to them. And some alumni have even come to us and applied as if they were applying for a professional grant to make work. So we've even given grants of like 1,75,000 for them to go off and do exactly what Mahesh was talking about, even in the professional world. But over there, part of this process, unlike other grant making processes, was they had to identify a mentor, and they had to like sort of run it through DSM parameters, and which were co-designed by people like Niloufar, Iravati, and others. So my point is that luxury is a luxury, but it's essential, because without it, how are you going to actually put all of that tools together that Mahesh spoke about?
Yes, thank you, Jihan. And coming to Niloufar, when we knew about the entrepreneurship course, all of us were very scared and nervous, because we all thought, yeah, we want to be artists. We don't care about kaise paise banate, kaise ye karte. But as we attended your course, we realized, oh my God, this is so essential. From understanding how you invested from the grant to the fund, these are the bedrocks of any production, because that's what gives you grounding. But it can also be very heavy. The idea of understanding basics of accounting, understanding Excel sheets, understanding numbers. So, and I know that you've been instrumental in conceiving this course. So, what were the key things that you kept in mind while conceiving this entrepreneurship course? And how important do you think is it for today's artist to understand that aspect, the business aspect of the arts?
Arjun, good question. It is absolutely vital, particularly in the Indian context, where we don't necessarily have producers who are out there looking to produce the work of other artists. The model that we have in India is really an artist-led model. What does that mean? In layman's terms, it means that if you are an artist, you want to make work, you are going to have to produce yourself. Try and think, I'd invite all the students on today, the potential students on today. Try and think of people, of theatre companies that produce their own work. You'll find almost all of them, all the theatre companies are led by somebody who is a director, possibly also an actor and a writer. That is the model in India. So when we sort of conceived the course essentially earlier, it was really because you don't want students waiting around to be cast. If a lot of people are actors and they think that's the route that they're going to take into this profession, the theatre profession, we want them to be slightly more proactive, or to have the ability to do that at least, and to understand the environment. So when we designed it, I kind of tried to balance two factors. One was the sort of more abstract considerations of how you would conceive of a project, and when is the right time to bring it to life. How do you understand the context within which you're going to put your work? And then, of course, there were the very, very practical considerations, which are to do with how do you book a venue, what are the festivals that are available, and of course, how do you put a budget together? And that's everything from the expenditure to the income. How do you understand a budget?
Niloufar, also understanding the game of grants and funding. You posed a very interesting question to us, that why should anyone give you money? Who are you? And an awareness of where you stand. So this is also a game that as you keep getting into it and you keep improving, you increase the steps and the ladder, and your chances of getting grants also increases. So what are the things that one should be mindful of? And particularly in the course, what are the elements that you train the students so that they're aware of who, why, what, and when to approach?
So talking entirely about fundraising, I mean, we're using these sort of big terms like fundraising and grant making. But if you boil it down to its very essence, it's how do you get a play off on the ground, and you can do it with minimal amounts of money. You can do it, with sort of the sky being the limit. So really, I do sort of reflect both ends of the spectrum. So yes, there are certain sort of existing organizations and kinds of organizations that people can go to. But also for me, very important, it's about getting the students to self-reflect on who they could connect with, even on a much more informal basis. So anyone, it's buy-in for any project, right? You need to get buy-in at a funding level if you're looking for funders, but you also need to get buy-in from your audience. You need to get buy-in from your peers. You need to get buy-in from the people you're working with. It's all that. So yes, we do have a sort of, dedicated session in fundraising. But if I were to look at the entire course, it's really about how do I convince people that my project is of worth?
Mhm.
And how do I analyze it for myself to see if it is for worth? And worth to an audience, or in terms of connecting to other people, and not just because it's something precious to me. Because obviously that maximizes your chances of taking that particular work out into the world and making it a success.
Also, Nilofer, in terms of the current times, how has the course, your particular limb of the course, how has it adapted to these changes? And what do you think are the challenges and opportunities that the current batch of students and also young theatre makers across will face while dealing with this aspect of theatre?
So to answer the second part of your question first, I think really the word digital theatre is something that is being defined at the moment. And I think really it is a completely individual call. Some people are not comfortable with the digital space. They don't believe that it is theatre if it is happening, on an online forum. There are other people who have different opinions. I'm someone who's somewhere sort of in between. But I think really those are personal calls that have to be made. And our understanding, it's right now, it's all too close. I think, again, people will know where it really sits with a little bit of time, with a little bit of reflection. Of course, there was already a trend. It's not that the pandemic has brought about this term. Obviously, with the virtual world being so common, people were doing work and theatre work online, even before the pandemic. Of course, it's forced a lot more people to go online. But like I said, there are different interpretations of what counts as theatre or not. Where do you draw the line between it being a film or theatre? For me, really, I would say, these definitions are not that important. You've got to take your call and just, put your creative work out there. And if somebody wants to call it a film and somebody else wants to call it theatre, somebody else wants to call it performance art, you just breathe and do what you're doing, particularly for people who are young and who don't have the opportunity to go out into the traditional sort of spaces at the moment. It's important. Don't stop doing.
Yeah.
And just,
sorry.
Your first question, online.
Yeah.
Honestly, for my course, it hasn't made that big a difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something where we move with bodies, etc. And again, it's kind of something that's going to be more common in real life. So people are doing more meetings in real life online. People are pitching all their projects online.
Nilofer, I asked this.
All of us.
Yeah, sorry. I asked this question because I know that Doorse Brothers also have. I was also in one of the online things that we've done, right? So now, when ideas are being pitched and things are happening, how important is it to have skills which are generally very screen oriented? It could be theater, but still things like editing, and are those things essential now when we are pitching?
I think, yes, of course, it is a huge bonus. But I think also you need to look at getting expertise in. I would not underestimate that. So if you are doing something that requires heavy editing and you're not doing, say a piece of theater which you're performing live to camera, then yes, get people who understand where you're at and involve them.
All right, fabulous. All right, so this is my last question to all of you, and there's been this huge debate across the globe about theater and language, and especially with respect to drama school. There was a debate at one point that should there be local drama schools which cater to regions and region-specific languages. So in drama school, how do we cut across language and still create an essence of theater where students who've come from regions where they might not be comfortable with English or Hindi, but they still benefit from the pedagogy from the course? It's open to anybody to answer. Okay, Jihan.
Jehan? No. Okay, since
All right.
Jehan is keeping his mic on mute. So I think, should there be local theater schools in local theater languages? Yes, of course they should. Is that the space that drama school is in currently? No, it's not the space that it's occupying. But what we certainly sort of try and do at drama school is, yes, the primary medium of instruction is English with a large mix of Hindi. However, I think, Jehan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've always kept sort of the caveat open that certain students, if they're not that comfortable in English, they have kind of the option to be able to ask questions, at least in another language. Maybe the three primary languages of Maharashtra.
No, the school works bilingually for the most part in Hindi and English. The language of performance, at least when we start doing main productions, etc., has more and more been Hindi, because we find that at least that's closer to it's closer to our own culture and our own capabilities in terms of the group in the room on each year. But we try and accommodate students who absolutely, like most students we get, have a certain amount of competency in both languages to varying degrees. But we get the peer group to support each other. And the second is we also work to support students who absolutely cannot learn in English, who absolutely cannot learn in Hindi. And for the most part, it works. One year we had 2 students who primarily were in Marathi. That was a challenging year in terms of us also trying to give them the support required, and we need to do more work on that. But even that was possible. I think we've had some crazy examples of like Roshan Matthew, for example, in the second year batch, who played the lead role in the final production, which was purely in Hindi, and he hadn't spoken a word of Hindi before that, but somehow he did the additional work to make it happen. And it was rather good, if you ask me. But yes, I mean, I completely agree with Niloufar. At the end of the day, command of a language, especially for performance, words off the stage, the story you're telling, you should have solid command of a language, so that you have the tools or the ability to pick and choose the exact right word for the exact right moment.
All right. We can open the floor to a few questions. There are a bunch of questions in the chat section, so we'll just take a few. Roger Stephen says that sometimes there are some factors which has been adverse for online training. So by chance, when individual is not able to attend the class, can he review the session again? And is that something which is a possibility?
No, as we, Roger, as we said earlier, that we don't, one of the things we do in order for the agreement between the people learning and the people teaching to feel present with one another, learning together as a group, even though they're in the individual digital space for the first semester, before they go to the residency in the second semester, where they actually are together in physical space. But in the first semester, we don't record most of the classes because there's no option for a student to miss a class and then see the stuff later on. The idea is to learn together, and that community can be built with that precondition. So people are supposed to have their video on, they're supposed to be present in the room, They're supposed to be completely in a distraction-free environment for our courses, because we wanted to transfer the same rigor of training that we had in our normal physical courses. So our conditions are quite stringent that way. Video off, things like that, not attending classes, attendance is registered, and we work accordingly. But what I found with the batch is that even that timetable that they have plastered up on their wall in their home, in their bedroom, where they are up at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're doing their morning ritual together, they're doing their yoga, they're doing their voice training, etc. By the time 2 weeks have passed, they have set themselves such a personal routine of physical and mental discipline that they are just geared for great training. And of course, I saw another thing in the chat window about this medium being quite exhausting. Yes, absolutely. We know that. We limited the number of hours and classes every second day. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be a long day, but Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday would be a shorter day with smaller interactions. Also, this medium is very cut to cut, right? We're all in these little boxes. The meeting will finish at exactly this time. So we would also be quite fluid. We would always open the room 15 minutes before so that people could walk in almost casually like they would when they're walking into a classroom. After the class was over, the faculty would be the person remembering that, okay, guys, my teaching time is over. Now we're done. And then people would choose to stay back and hang out, etc. So there was also a relaxed feeling of community, so that it wasn't always like a switch on and off. चलो मैं अभी क्लास खत्म हो गया, मैं हैंग आउट कर सकता हूँ, 2-3 सवाल पूछ सकता हूँ, and then to Kisco when they felt it. Also, we had this program, we had this thing also where they were supposed to use their after class time, that half-an-hour window, to just sit down and note. So maybe I'm sitting there quietly, but I don't have to talk to Mahesh. We're in the same space, but I'm just writing my notes, and then Mahesh might have a question because he's like, what happened over there? Did he say that? Did he mean this? So there was a little discussion. So there was a little bit of time for collective reflection and individual note taking of the experience that they had for the 2 hours before, or the 1 hour, 45 minutes before. We've told everyone to be mindful of how they use the screen, etc., and all of this. But it is exhausting, no question about it.
All right. Before we go for more questions, I know that Mahesh has to leave at 5:20. So before we let you go, any pearls of wisdom that you want to share or leave behind with all of us? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, well, I don't know about pearls of wisdom. I mean, we all have them. It's not that I don't have any. Well, I would say just listening to this whole thing, and I know this is a matter of huge concern about online and whatnot. All I want to say is that as theater artists especially, and artists in general, it's hugely important that we have a relationship with the present. So it is, I constantly use the word plasticity in class. And I think there is a dance between time present and time past and time future. And I think we just need to tango with the present. So and that's it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you, Mahesh.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, Jahan. Thanks, Nilofer. Thanks, Shruti.
Thank you, Mahesh. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
I just want to take a moment and use Mr. Dattani's idea of tangoing with the present. We are in the here and now, and I'm seeing a lot of questions around, will you be going back to normal in school training? How long are you going to do this digital residential module for? And the answer to all those questions is we don't know. Okay. When we first shut down the school in March of 2020, we thought we would be back in 2 months. Then we thought we would be back in 5 months. Then finally, we started a digital course in November, thinking we'll be back such and such date. Now, third wave ka baat aa raha hai. At some point, we as theatre makers believe in the idea of resilience, adaptability, and change. In the moment, what can you do? You can sit at home. You can go out and do something, but the industry is not even kicked off. It's going to be another 2 or 3 years before the film industry recovers. God knows how long it's going to take for the theatre industry to recover, which is a sad thing. But at the same time, it doesn't stop us from figuring out what we can do. And the people who come to the DSM course are ready to learn chahe kuch bhi ho. and they're ready to do the work because they trust that we have done our homework, that we will teach a course that is we are proud of and we can be responsible, take responsibility for. So if you ask me, and this is not it, I think that I've heard now कि ये in-person training ही मेरे लिए है, digital training से कुछ नहीं होगा हमारा या मेरा. We had a lot of people skeptical about this, even the students who joined this batch, the digital batch that we currently have going. They swear by it. They think that it absolutely worked, and they're really excited to be on the residential program as well. And they were equally skeptical at the beginning, but they saw what happened to them. And in the meantime, I just ask you, if you're not going to do this right now, then what are you going to do? If you're going to wait for our course because you've been watching our course for a while and you're just waiting for us to get back into in-person training, tab tak kya karoge? And also, in-person training will not be exactly the same ever again because we have learned so much now. For example, you might be in person, but I might get you an instructor from France to come in because now I can via Zoom. If the class can be taught, if the knowledge can be given, if the experience of learning can be delivered using the digital medium, and that gives us so much more access to so many more people, then why not? And the other reason also that we're saying that we want the digital format to somewhere stay in our thinking. We won't be permanently in pure digital. We will always go into a blended format when we can. We will figure out different ways to do things so that we can get the best people in to teach at any given time. But the other thing that this does is many people didn't come to the DSM's course in Mumbai because living in Mumbai is an additional 2 lakhs of training, of energy and time. The cost of living, the cost of transport, the cost of khana, pina, rent, etc. Mumbai is not the cheapest city. Suddenly, people are able to do this course, and the whole thing, their entire cost is covered within the course fees instead of coming in paying. At that time, it was 4.5 lakhs. 4.8 lakhs, I can't remember, plus another 2 lakhs of living in Mumbai. So this has suddenly opened up the courses to so many more people who can now think about doing the course before they take that big step of coming to Mumbai. So I just wanted to say that for those of you who are waiting for our in-person course to open, we will open our in-person course again. But even that in-person course will probably have a residential unit. They'll probably have a digital unit, and they'll probably come to the Mumbai Marathi Sahitya Sangh towards the middle or the end. We don't know. But jab tak we don't know, this is what we are offering. It's pretty good. I would say seize the moment and do this course. Don't wait.
For that. Shruti, do we have the students, previous year's batches to speak about?
We have students from the current batch. Shreyan is here.
All right,
so
great.
yeah.
So hi Shreyan. Hi. So Shreyan has been a part of the digital course. So Shreyan, if you could share your journey with us and your key takeaways in terms of your learnings, that would be great.
Yes. So I have 4 major points that I would like to talk about today. So one of them was actually, a few of them have already come up in the conversation. They've been brought up by Nilufar and by Jehan and by Mahesh sir as well. So apart from that, so let me start. So the first thing is that when we started, we all also had the same doubts that all of you must be having right now. Some of the same skepticism that we had. But you see, time gave us perspective. And we realized that, this course being online, the first part is that faculty from all over the world can teach you. So we literally had 2 faculties from UK, one from France. So the thing is that this probably might not have been possible in a normal context, if it would have been physical classes. This probably might not have been possible. So that is one of the positives. Apart from that, right now we are on the verge of the 3rd wave, and even the vaccinations are going strong, but still even around 50% of US is vaccinated. Still the Delta 3rd wave is going on in the US. So at the same time, right now, there's a good chance that there will be a 3rd wave here, right? So at that point of time, if what are you making sure that you are working on your craft and you are getting to learn at the same time. So that was one of the crucial parts that made me take my decision, because a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends who are also in this field, they are mostly sitting at home right now. But at the same time, I am able to learn more about my craft and hone my craft. And of course, the point that Jihan mentioned, that you save up a lot of time, energy, and travel fatigue if you would have been living in Mumbai. So just a second. Yeah. So apart from that, the major thing that I would like to talk about, which is my own learning experience, is that I used to think that, what difference would be between the online and physical space. And then I kind of realized that at the end of the day, it's just an instructor, it's a facilitator who's trying to communicate to you, right? Knowledge, and knowledge can come in any form. Even if they are right in front of you, it will be through words, right? And if you have your own space, your own room is your own space. So that means that you are able to, you have a different kind of freedom in your own space, which is of course unparalleled anywhere. So it doesn't really make a huge difference as in term of the learning, because I was myself shocked by the amount of learning that I have undergone in the past few months, and I have learned quite a lot. And the third point that I have is the faculty is amazing, and so are your fellow students, your own community. So the thing is, this point I would like to say is, there's a very, very famous, well-known quote, which is, if you want to go fast, walk alone. If you want to go far, walk together, right? So the thing is, if you want to survive out in this, in Mumbai's, in anywhere, if you need a community support system, you need people with you. And all of this fellow students that you will have, they all have been handpicked. They all have gone through a hard audition process, and every one of them has a lot of to bring to the table. You will never be, I guarantee you that you will never be the smartest person in the room. There will always be things that will amaze you, and that will, that will add to your learning and to your knowledge. So that was a really good thing, because I was getting intellectually challenged at all points of time, and people really had brilliant perspectives, and all people came from different, all of my colleagues, they all came from different points of time, right? Everyone had their different journeys and their different learnings. So I ended up learning a lot from my own community as well.
I just wanted to say that even for the faculty, we don't ever feel like we're the smartest person in the room.
Just a quick heads up, everyone. Thank you, Shreyan, for sharing your experience. It's 5:29 right now. I'll be taking up a few more questions for the next 5 minutes. Arjun has to leave. He has a meeting. Arjun, thank you so much for coming in and moderating this session today. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Just very quickly, we also have Dheeraj Vadvani, who's an alumnus from the 6th batch of DSM. So Dheeraj, I would like to invite you to share a few words, share your experiences of your training at DSM. Dheeraj, are you there? Hi, Dheeraj. I think Dheeraj is still connecting. All right, I am just opening the room for everyone right now. If you have any questions, participants, if you have any questions, you can just directly unmute yourself and ask questions. We have Jihan, Manikshwa, and Nilofer in the room right now for another 5 minutes.
Were there some unanswered questions in the chat window, Shruti, that you want us to address first?
I think we've answered most of the questions. Ankit, okay, yeah, Ankit has a question. He's been doing theater for the last 1.3 years, and he wants to explore theater in the southern region. And he's willing to learn new languages too. What else do I need to do if I can get an opportunity to work there? That's Ankit's question. Jihan, Nilofer, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, sorry, I just got got a piece of news. So Ankit, your question again, Shruti, just remind me, sorry again.
Yes.
Yes, okay, I got it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, let me just one more thing I wanted to say about language, Ankit, is that you should, I think learning a new language is really a good thing to do in terms of unlocking your brain. It literally rewires your brain to learn a new language. For me, no matter what language I can watch a play in, yes, the words have meaning, but somehow when you're watching a play or when you're watching a story, even in a language not known to you, even if you don't see the subtitles, you kind of get a sense of what's going on if the performances are good and if the acting is good and if the way that the piece was constructed is good. And I think that's the language of theater. That's the language of performance. That's the language of creating live performance events. So I would say that you come to theater schools for that training, but parallelly learn a new language. It will launch you in a whole other way. And so I completely endorse your idea of learning a new language.
Great, thank you, Jihan. Nikki has a question. I feel trust in the institution is the most important to learn the craft. What is your opinion on this, keeping in mind the digital learning?
Oh, Nikki, thank you for that question. But I mean, like, I can't, yeah, exactly. I mean, without the trust in what we do, there's no question of learning the craft. If students are going to come in and surrender a year of their life to this process, then we better know what we're doing, or we better really put in all of the mechanisms in place that make sure that the trust around the act of teaching and learning is solid. And I said this quite at length in the meeting. In case you missed some of it, you can go over the recording. But everything from the way we run our courses, the way we run a digital room, the health and safety practices that we have right now, the student support services, we all of it was driven by the fact that अगर हमको digital medium में theater सिखाना है, अगर हमको digital medium में acting सिखाना है, then we better do a damn good job of it, because at the end of the day, it's the DSM's name, it's the DSM's reputation. We have 100 alumni out there right now who are all doing some amazing, incredible work. And now when they walk into an audition or when they walk into a room and say, I'm DSM se hai, there has been positive things happening where people give them a little bit more time, a little bit more attention, because they know ki yahan ka training acha hai. So similarly, we can't be adding to that alumni group people who have any less quality of training. So I'm going to be equally proud of the students graduating this year from the digital batch, which is now in the residential section, where they've gone for a 13-week boot camp in residency format, where they're all learning in person together. And it's our reputation is all we have. And so to build on that reputation, we have to make sure that each batch is trained better than the previous batch. So of course, in the digital medium, we've kept all of this in mind.
Thank you, Jan. There's one more question in the chat window from Abhijit. He's asking, I just wanted to know how the learning and growth of an individual in different aspects is tracked. Before you answer this question, Jihan, just a quick heads up, everyone. It's 5:34 right now. We're about to close the session in another 2-3 minutes. If you have any more questions, put them down in the chat window or send it across to us on our email ID. I will share the email ID in the chat window with all of you. Yeah, Jihan, Abhijit's question.
There were a whole bunch of questions also on fees and scholarships. I know that Shruti is doing an amazing webinar in the coming weeks about that, so you should attend that as well. So I'm just saying that out loud for people. But yes, that's a really good question. How do we track students' progress? So we don't do A, B, C, D, E, F grades. We don't do pass, fail, anything like that. You have to, because theater is a creative medium, you're learning over here. Plus, I just think that grades don't work. Each individual is unique, and their learning journey and what works for them and what doesn't work for them is completely unique to that individual. So we track, and first of all, we get them to track their own learning, because they write these self-reflection journals and they have to review those journals with a student convener every 6 to 8 weeks. So every time they've written about 3 journals, they come in and they check, they actually have a cross check with a faculty member. The second learning dimension is that the faculty, after every module of teaching, if Nilufer has completed a module, she will give them a set of feedback around their work, around what they submitted, etc. Basically to say, this is what you did, this is what worked, and this is what you need to do better, and these are your strengths and weaknesses. And you're supposed to read those with your student convener as well, so that you have this act of like, okay, let me understand कि faculty मैं अपने बारे में क्या बोल रहा हूँ, faculty भी मेरे बारे में क्या बोल रहे हैं, और उससे मैं खुद मतलब जान लूंगा कि मेरा actual progress status क्या है. And so this is what we do in terms of your individual journey. And if you look at it, every single student has their own unique journey, because we offer 10 or 15 different tools and methods at any given point in time. Tool A, B, and C will work for student 1, 2, and 3, but it won't work for student 4, 5, and 6. And student 4, 5, and 6 might respond better to student to tool X, Y, and Z. So my point is that the training, everybody gets to see the same training and do the same training, but everyone's individual
It's Jahan's internet. I think Jahan's frozen. Yeah, I think Jahan's frozen on the screen.
Shruti, I think we should move on.
Yes.
Neeraj is back. I can see him if you want to, if you want to
Sure.
allow him.
So just wrapping up the session because it's time. This is the second webinar of the series, the webinar series that we are doing at DSM, and we have 3 more webinars, and we'll be covering topics like careers after DSM. So Ankita, I'm sorry, I'm afraid we won't be able to take this question right now, but do join us in the second webinar. Then we have a separate session on the financial aid and the payment plans that will answer most of your questions about the scholarships and the alternative payment plans that we have at DSM. Please do join those webinars. We will keep you posted. Just write to us on the email ID info@thedramaschoolmumbai.in and share your questions with us. Our course advisors, the team is available to guide you through the application process and answer all your questions regarding the PG course in acting and theatre making. Before we close, just a few closing words from Nilofer and Jahan. Nilofer, would you like to just go ahead first?
I think just pretty much what Jahan has mentioned before in the course of answering a few questions, what Mahesh also said. My advice to anyone out there is, just get up and do. It's all storytelling at the end of the day, whether it's online, whether it's offline. The most important thing is that you have a huge network of, professionals from the theatre world teaching at this course. And this is your opportunity to kind of connect with them rather than waiting and pushing that, opportunity to a point in the future. So if I were a young student, I would just, want to continue doing what I want to do. So good luck to you all and find your ways of doing that, whether it's at DSM or elsewhere.
Thank you.
All the best. I hope you guys have a really, I do look forward to reading your applications and seeing you in at the auditions.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jahan. Thank you, Nilofer. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Just reach out to your fellows who have missed the webinar. Those you think that will benefit from these webinars, just ask them to write to us. We will be sharing these webinar recordings with you anyway. These recordings are also available on the DSM YouTube channel and on the DSM Facebook page, so you can just check them out and just share the word across. And if you think that this really helped you understand about the course, and answered all your questions that you had about acting and the theatre making process. Thank you everyone once again, and we'll be seeing you in the next webinar.
Also, may I just say, if you want to feel and experience the training yourself, there is a open day happening in a couple of days. Shruti, more details about that, please.
We have an open day scheduled for this Saturday, which is conducted by Hetal Varia, Building a Relationship with Your Voice. We are doing these open days are scheduled for every Saturday, so we'll be doing another 3-4 open days. There's a small registration fee for the workshop. Most of you who have joined the session already know about the all the open days, we've been reaching out to you. The course advisors are already speaking to you about the process. So do stay in touch and sign up for these workshops, because they are going to give you an experience of how we are teaching in the digital format, and also help you learn a lot about the DSM process, the training approach, the curriculum, and what we do at the school. Thank you, everyone. It was lovely having all of you. Bye.